Two words sliced through the kitchen like a blade. We can take. They weren't finished the sentence. They didn't need to be. The smell of chocolate cake and half-empty glasses from my retirement party still hung in the air. I was carrying a dessert plate when the fragment hit me, sharp, precise, and aimed at the only thing in the house that really mattered, my retirement fund. My name is Ethan Cole. I retired last month from Riverbend Credit Association after a long life of finding the holes people use to steal from one another. People called me meticulous, and they weren't wrong. But no checklist prepares you for the particular kind of betrayal that comes from your child's mouth. I stood in the doorway until the plate was cool in my hands, listening. Mark's laugh, lighter than it should be, blended with a woman's voice, gentle, practiced. "We'll be out before noon," she said, the confidence of someone who'd run 100 rehearsals and made the same lie feel like truth. "He won't even notice for a week." Mark answered with a nervous chuckle. "He's proud. He'll tell people it's a mistake. By the time anyone realizes, we'll be gone." Their tone had the awful casualness of people discussing travel plans, as if flight times and balances were the same thing. They assumed I was asleep upstairs. They assumed wrong. I should have slammed the closet door, grabbed the stack of papers in the foyer, and confronted them then and there. Instead, I put the plate on the counter and pressed myself against the pantry jamb until my pulse stopped shouting in my ears. For a long, stupid moment, I did nothing. There was room for a dozen reactions: rage, grief, nausea, but first came a hollow, animal disbelief. You cannot unhear the sound of your child planning your ruin. When the shock cleared enough for thought, something older slid into place underneath it: the habit of observation. For almost 4 decades I watched patterns, not because I liked it, but because it was my work. Today, that muscle began to twitch. I reached into my pocket without a sound and tapped the record button on my phone. Legal. The house and the device were mine. Let them keep talking. Their conversations softened in the dark of the kitchen, short phrases, names replaced with code. P.O. Box, Anna said. 2 days. Small transfers into the holding accounts. Keep the checks staggered, less than reporting limits. He won't raise an alarm. It was enough. Hint, not blueprint. Coded, confident, and therefore believable. They made fewer specifics than you'd expect and more assumptions about my confusion. That was their weapon: patience and theater. 2 years ago, Mark stood at my door with a paper envelope and a hopeful face. "Clean," he'd said. He had a ring. A woman named Anna stood beside him and described a life rebuilt through counseling and steady work. She wore a badge I never saw, the low-key authority of someone who teaches others how to trust. She touched my forearm and said, "Just in case, Mr. Cole. For emergencies." I signed the temporary access forms the way any tired old man would sign a gentle request from someone he wanted to believe in. This was the only explanation they needed: a plausible, regrettable convenience. A child recovering, a father trying to help. But none of that explains why the voices in my kitchen arranged their words with the practiced cadence of schemers. Mark sounded anxious in places he hadn't before. Ennis sounded like someone teaching lines to a novice. There was a confidence there that suggested prior repeats. The temptation was to leap straight to recrimination, to drag their duplicity into the open and watch the performance collapse. My years taught me another lesson. Exposure without preparation risks losing everything. I'd seen lack of patience wreck cases. You don't bring a knife to a gunfight. So I listened a little longer. Their planning was frustratingly vague in specifics, but brutal in intent. They referenced paperwork and the shared access and timing. They relied on my pride, the idea that I would be reluctant to admit I'd been played. "He'll tell people he's confused," Anna said. "He won't want to be embarrassed. He'll stay silent." The cruelty in that line is what broke me. Not the money itself, but the thought that they saw my dignity as something negotiable. For the first time that night, the anger arrived, slow, incandescent. It didn't burst out in a shout. It gathered like steam. I walked to my study, shut the door with deliberate quiet, and sat in Evelyn's old chair. Her picture watched me from the mantel. She'd always been clear-eyed, the kind of woman who saw intentions through the most convincing lies. How'd I miss this? The list started, methodical and clinical. Evidence. Time. Patterns. I couldn't act on ignorance. I needed a small, surgical plan, not to punish, but to prevent. Not yet the bank, not yet arrests, but something immediate. First, Stop them from touching the principal. Second, make sure any moves left a trace. Third, force the game into daylight on my terms, not theirs. I left the study not with a swagger of triumph, but with a body that felt hollowed out and purposeful. I took one small thing. The duplicate key to the safe deposit box I kept at the credit union where I'd worked for 39 years. I'd always considered it overkill. Now it was the hinge on which everything might turn. I placed a note in my pocket instructing myself to call no one yet. I would not be hurried. As I slipped back to the kitchen, the conversation had quieted. The plates were stacked in the sink. Anna hummed as she wiped her rim. Mark's shoulders were loose, too loose for a man about to walk into a theft he'd rehearsed. They moved like a couple that had rehearsed the final act until the lines stuck. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Mark. Change of plan. Tonight's better. See you at 7 m. It was a single line, ordinary and wrong in a way that made my blood run ice cold. He'd just suggested the house, my house, was a convenient staging ground, and now he wanted the stage to be tonight. The cliff came easy. If they came earlier than their plan, I had moments, not hours. The first move would have to be immediate and secretive. I would not call the bank. I would not call a lawyer. Not yet. I would be the thing they expected least, composed, waiting, and already 2 moves ahead. Tonight, they thought they could steal my life. Tonight, I would let them begin, but I would not let them finish. Mark's text came through like a small detonator. Change of plan. Tonight. Come by 7 a. Anna's initial had a weight of its own. She didn't usually sign his messages. When she did, it meant coordination. It also explained why he'd show up early, not because he was reckless, but because he'd been told to. She'd said, tonight, not tomorrow, and that pushed him into risk. The message settled in my palm as if it were a physical thing. I thumbed the screen, then typed, okay, see you. Let them expect routine. Let them feel comfortable. But the timeline had changed, and when plans change, so does risk. I left home for the credit union at 3:10 p.m. No parade, no dramatic entrance. Just a slow, practiced walk through doors I'd known for decades. Janet glanced up from her monitor and, after a long beat, recognized me. She didn't ask about retirement. She asked the way only people who've shared crises ask, quietly, with options. I need a temporary in-person authorization only, I said. 72 hours, no online or phone transfers. She hesitated, the kind of pause that measures consequence. That's unusual, she said. Make it unusual, I answered. No lecture. No arguments. Janet made it 2 clicks and a single authorization line. She printed a confirmation and handed it to me with a look that carried old loyalties and new concern. I didn't throw the paper away. I slid it into the false bottom of the cigar box in my desk, the one Evelyn kept for receipts. If they tried to claim I'd handled the bank clumsily, I'd have paper to prove otherwise. I trusted my colleagues, but I didn't trust the timing. That small precaution felt like heavy armor. Back at the house, I did the 2 things my instincts screamed at me to do. Scan the perimeter and check the study. Only 2 clues mattered. Only 2. The rest of the house could be staged and staged again by anyone with enough nerve. I'd learned that the hard way. First, the welcome mat. It was pushed an inch to the left. Not messy, deliberate. The kind of nudge someone makes when they've opened and closed the door a few times to see how it behaves. Second, the study door was not latched the way I always latched it. I locked that door in the late afternoon even on ordinary days because I'm careful with papers. This was the change that told me someone had been closer than they should have. That was enough. I didn't make a scene. I didn't call the police. I moved with a deliberate calm that felt foreign in my chest. If they'd been reckless enough to test entry, they might come back to see what they'd disturbed. That suggested either overconfidence or pressure, both dangerous. At 6:32 p.m., the first small escalation landed. A notification from a bank vendor pinged my phone. A single line. Profile change request initiated. Joint account transfer settings. In normal circumstances, it would have been an administrative blip. In the kind of plan they were apparently plotting, it was a bell. Someone had poked at the joint account. Not yet enough to steal, but enough to force them into a faster timeline. And enough reason to come early, check doors, test windows. I sat in the dim of the living room and let breathing return. There's a centrifugal moment after a shock when every second stretches out. You can feel choices as if they're objects. Call, confront, flee. For a heartbeat, I felt my old self, the exhausted father who'd signed away more than he should, welcome him back. Then the professional muscle I'd kept tucked under the grief flexed. No theatrics. No impulsive exposure. I would act, but I would do it on my terms. Mark arrived 10 minutes later. He parked with the engine still running, then sat for nearly a half-minute, longer than a friendly visit required. That waiting was strange, but it no longer surprised me. He'd been instructed to test the house. He'd been told there might be a change at the bank. He was jittery in a way that conveyed pressure from elsewhere more than guilt. He checked the front door the way a man checks a safe, a professional's hand on a tool. He tapped lightly, a few polite knocks. I let the knock land and answered after a measured pause. "Come in," I said. He stepped inside, a practiced smile pasted on. His eyes flicked left, then right, then to the study door, then back to me. That micro-trajectory was the kind I could read like a ledger entry. He noticed the door wasn't latched. He noticed the mat nudged. But he didn't blurt or accuse. He adjusted to a different performance. Apologetic son, visiting unexpectedly early. "Hey, Dad. Sorry. Anna wanted to swing by early," he said, as if sharing the reason was casual. "Everything all right?" I asked. He swallowed. "Yeah, just errands." He let the sentence hang, incomplete. His finger found the corner of a fringe on the rug and rubbed it as if it settled nerves. Small gestures mattered more than words tonight. Before I could decide what to do next, my phone buzzed again. Anna's name flashed on the screen, a short text. "Run the perimeter. I'm parking. Drive will wait. Move if necessary. Hey, driver." The word landed like a lead weight. She had not been alone in their plan. Mark's face shifted when he read the text. Twinge of irritation, a flash of fear. He dropped his voice. "She wants everything checked. Said there's a driver now. Someone to make the pickup in case." "You didn't say who?" I interrupted gently. "I don't know," he admitted. "She's handling logistics." The admission was a brittle thing. Not quite a confession, not quite a denial. The house felt smaller, charged with the electricity of decision. Mark's nervous energy was contagious. He fidgeted, spoke too fast, then stopped himself. He was not a man at ease. He was a man being steered. Whether he was the pilot or the passenger was suddenly unclear. Then headlights swept across the east windows. A second car eased into the drive. Not chill, not discreet, deliberate. The silhouette in the passenger seat was not the shape of a casual friend. Tall, broad-shouldered, alert. For a moment, the room was a slow-motion tableau. Mark's jaw tightened, my breath measured, and the newcomer climbed out of the car with the caution of a man who knew how to move without making noise. He approached the front door like someone who expected to be let in. I felt everything thread taut in me. Fear, yes, but also a clean, bright focus. The threat had escalated from a furtive plan to an operation with muscle behind it. I met Mark's eyes and, for the first time that night, let the tremor in my hands show. He read it and flinched. "Dad," he whispered, voice thin. "We can talk." But the knock came before he finished. 3 measured raps that belonged to someone used to knocking on closed doors. My heart dropped, then steadied. I opened it. The silhouette filled the frame. And I knew, without any more proof, that this was no longer a family dispute. This was organized, and it was personal. They came because a test failed. That was the first thing I picked up. Not because they told me, but because of the way Mark's hands trembled when he glanced at his phone and the way Anna's jaw tightened when the stranger in the doorway mentioned housekeeping. People who run schemes hate uncertainty. A failed trial launch forces improvisation. Improvisation forces risks. Mark had pushed a small transfer at noon, $10, then $100, just to see if the joint routing would accept an outbound. It bounced. That little failure was the nudge that moved them from patient erosion to direct action. It explained why Mark had shown up early and why Anna had brought help. I made a choice before I opened the door. I would let them in, but I would do it on my terms. You can call me cautious. I call it discipline. I left the chain on the door and unlocked it a crack with my free hand, enough to speak through the gap. "Mark," I called, keeping my voice level. "No surprises, Dad," he said from the porch. Too loud, or maybe trying to be calm. "Anna's in the car." I opened the door the rest of the way, but I kept my body partially between the frame and the hallway. An old man's half-step that still reads as an invitation but denies full access. The stranger in the cap pushed his way through as if it were his right. I moved with him, not against. I positioned myself where I could see the study door and the living room at once. Let them walk in. Let them expose their intent. Let me watch. The man was close enough now that I could see the threadbare seam of his jacket. He gave a quick nod to Mark and Anna, and then moved like a man checking a property he'd done this to before. Fast eyes, cosine angle head tilts, mental notes taken in seconds. He carried a slim duffel and a folder with a printed spreadsheet clipped to the front. The folder said something important. They were looking for numbers, names, routing, paperwork that could be used if the online method failed. Evening, the man said. His voice was low and rehearsed. Logistics call. Anna said you might be able to help smooth this out. I smiled. Not a warm smile, but the polite one I'd used on depositors and grifters my whole career. Sit there, I said, and I directed him to the armchair facing the study. The direction was small, but deliberate. Put him where his line of sight blocks the hallway. Keep him where I can see his hands. Keep him where any sudden move toward the study would expose his intent to everyone in the room. Mark was pale. He stalked through the living room like a man testing his courage, and then slumped onto the sofa. He kept looking at his phone. His thumb tapped the screen like a staccato of nervousness. Anna stood by the foyer, still in the car smell of the commute. She wore a coat over a blouse that said therapist more than thief. That was her advantage, professional calm as a costume. You checked the status? The man asked Mark without looking at me. Mark nodded. No outbound yet. It threw an error. Okay, the man said, and from the way he said it you could tell he'd already calculated 3 contingencies. So we're moving physical. I let the sentence land. Physical meant break-in, coercion, or, if desperate enough, violence. None of it would be pretty. None of it would be clean. Anna crossed to the table and placed her satchel on the wood with the softest of thuds. She removed a slim envelope and set it down like a promise. We don't want trouble, she said, voice smooth as a bandage. We just want to arrange access so no one gets hurt. It was the old phrasing of manipulation. Care as threat, mercy as leverage. She stepped closer, and I noticed a detail I'd missed before, the flash of a name badge under her coat. Not an official state ID, but a laminated credential with a logo I'd never seen. A clever touch. Enough to make someone blink, not enough to withstand a call. You try to transfer at noon, I said. Her eyes flicked to Mark and back to me. For a second, Anna's mask wavered, just the smallest fissure. She smiled too quickly. Oh, she replied. Technical things happen. The man laughed once, a dry sound without humor. He clumsy poked the system. Figured we'd come see why. If it's on the books, we can adjust. If not, he tilted his head toward the study door. We can look around for what we need. That admission changed the room. It told me their plan had steps. Try online. If fail, coerce the elderly owner to re-enable. If he resists, locate paper proofs, documents, passwords, signatures that let them reroute funds the old-fashioned way. They had contingency ladders. That was the part I'd underestimated when I let them in. Or rather, it was the part I'd anticipated but hadn't yet confronted. I moved a chess piece. No one's touching anything yet, I said. If you want to work through this like civilized people, sit. We'll talk. It was a small maneuver, but it put them on a clock. Civilized negotiation buys me time. Time lets mistakes appear. The stranger watched my hands as if noting the steadiness of my fingers. He shifted his duffel to the floor beside the chair. The folder on his lap showed the spreadsheet. Account numbers, partial SSNs, columns of dates. Someone had done research. Someone had compiled a victim list. Mark mouthed something, an apology, an explanation, and then pressed his face into his palms. He looked like a man who'd been pulled into a current and didn't know how to swim. Anna smiled again, predatorily soft. Let's not be dramatic, she said. We can solve this. Or it gets messy. The man nodded, then reached into his duffel and drew out a small black device, no larger than a pack of cards, with a connector wire and a taped-on handwritten label, router reset /admin kit. The device was specific, professional. They had planned for access obstructions. When he set it on the coffee table, his hand hovered near the study door. For a moment, everything held its breath. I did one last thing that would probably mean more in later chapters than now. I unhooked the small recording button I'd clipped to my belt earlier, an old habit, and let my fingers curl around it where he could not see. I did not show it. I did not reveal it. but I felt it like an anchor in my palm. If I had misread them, then tonight would be an awkward dinner. If I had read them correctly, then that small recorder and the bank authorization tucked in the cigar box would be the difference between walking away and walking into ruin. Anna looked at the device on the table, then at the folder, then at me. She made a choice. We don't want to make waves, Ethan, she said. Just help us out, and no one gets hurt. No one gets hurt. The words settled like smoke. Mark's head snapped up. His face was gone. The boy I loved looked smaller than the man sprawled in the chair. The stranger stood. We'll wait. He didn't ask. He didn't leave. He planted himself on the edge of the room between the study and the door, a silent guard. I could see the edges of their plan now, audible, brittle, improvable, and I could see a narrow path out for myself. One careful move at a time, patience, the right evidence, and the right moment to set a different kind of trap. Anna's smile widened, but it lacked certainty now. You tried at noon, I said again, quieter this time. That was a mistake. She froze, just for a second. Outside, a car door shut, another arrival, then silence. This was no longer a bargaining table. It was a countdown. I felt the recorder in my palm like a small promise. I tucked it deeper into my grasp and let the room hang waiting for the next move. The stranger didn't roam the house this time. He didn't need to. He stepped in, closed the door quietly behind him, and stood still, not blocking, not bluffing, just present, the way a man stands in a room he expects to influence. That alone made the air feel thinner. Anna followed him inside with a measured calm that could have passed for courtesy if you didn't know better. Her coat was still draped over one shoulder, as if she hadn't decided whether she was staying long or leaving quickly. She carried a satchel, not the duffel from before, smaller, more deliberate. Mark lingered in the doorway, caught between wanting to retreat and wanting to stay close to me. His eyes darted from Anna to the stranger, then to me, then back again. He didn't look terrified. He looked cornered. Ethan, Anna greeted, offering me the same gentle tone she used during rehab meetings. Sorry to barge in. We just need a conversation. I stepped aside just enough to let her in, no more. A controlled gesture. A boundary. You could have called, I said. She smiled without warmth. We tried something earlier. It didn't go through. There it was. The clean, simple explanation. Mark tested the account at noon. The transfer bounced. They panicked. The stranger spoke for the first time. Just want to clear a few things up before they escalate. Before they escalate, not before we escalate. He wasn't just a helper. He was pressure, a way to keep their timeline moving. Mark stepped forward. Dad, it's not what you think. Things got complicated. He sounded like someone trying to believe his own sentence. Anna motioned toward the dining table. Let's sit, she said, almost kindly. I didn't sit. Neither did the stranger. Anna waited one beat, then three. When I still didn't move, she removed a thin envelope from her satchel and placed it gently on the table, like a nurse laying out a medical form before a difficult conversation. No theatrics, no threats, just the quiet confidence of someone who believes documentation can solve anything. Go ahead, she murmured. You should look. I didn't lift it. Tell me what it is. You'll understand better if you see it. The stranger's hand slid into his jacket pockets, not for a weapon, but to anchor his posture. Still, watching, listening. I opened the envelope with one finger, slow enough to show I wasn't rushing, but steady enough to show I wasn't afraid. Inside were two documents, not three, not a villain's folder. The first was a letter from a financial planning service. Harmless, generic, a template about streamlining end-of-life logistics. The second was a partially completed form titled Temporary Financial Proxy Authorization. Not a power of attorney, not permanent, not illegal on its face, but enough, if I signed, to let them manage every dollar I had for 48 hours. I felt Mark watching me. When our eyes met, something flickered in him. Shame, fear, regret, or maybe all three. He wasn't collapsed. He wasn't innocent, but he was split. This is normal in many families, Anna said. Her tone stayed soft, careful. You know how complicated paperwork gets at your age. Let us handle it for a little while. She was playing the therapist, the reassuring professional, trying to frame coercion as caregiving. I set the papers down. You tried to move money today, I said to Mark. He stiffened, caught off guard. I just tried a small transfer. We thought the bank glitched. And when it didn't glitch, you drove here with him. I nodded at the stranger. Mark flinched. It was subtle, but real. Anna stepped between us, not aggressively, just enough to redirect. We didn't want to bother you. But the mismatch told us you adjusted something. We came to check in. Check in. As if this were a wellness visit. I held her gaze. If this is routine, you don't need him here. The stranger smiled slightly, the kind of smile that acknowledges accuracy without endorsing it. Anna didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on me. Routine doesn't mean we're careless. There it was. Her single dominant mode. Calm, clinical control. Therapeutic vocabulary wrapped around criminal intention. Mark took a step forward. Dad, just sign it so this doesn't get worse. There it was. The first time he'd revealed fear of escalation. Not fear of Anna. Not fear of the stranger. Fear of what would happen if I didn't comply. That told me more about their operation than anything else so far. I rested my hand lightly on the envelope, not claiming it, not yielding, just grounding the moment. Mark, I said quietly, tell me what happens if I say no. He didn't answer. The stranger did. Then we keep looking, he said. We figure out whatever changed today. Not a threat. A statement of process. Anna inhaled sharply. A quiet signal for him to hold back. He did. That was the first tiny fracture. The first sense of hierarchy I could exploit. I leaned back against the table and let the room settle. I'm not signing. The stranger shifted, ready. Anna lifted a hand. Not to calm him. To silence him. Ethan, she said softly, don't be dramatic. We're on a schedule. I felt something cold slide into place. Schedule meant a deadline. Deadline meant outside pressure. Outside pressure meant they weren't free agents tonight. And if they were under strain, then they were the ones at risk, not me. That thought clicked into me like a gear. And right then, 3 quick knocks rattled the back door. Sharp, close, confident. Every face turned. Anna's eyes widened, truly widened. We're not expecting anyone. The stranger's hand moved toward his pocket. Mark whispered, oh God. We didn't. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just watched the panic bloom in people who thought they controlled the room. The knock came again. Louder. I had triggered this possibility myself, quietly, long before they'd arrived. A contingency. A safeguard. A person who knew not to use the front door. Not police. Not a friend. Not convenient. But expectable. Someone who would walk in without hesitation. The back door handle turned. Anna whispered, who the hell did you call, Ethan? I didn't answer. Because the truth was simple. They hadn't trapped me. They'd walked into a room that was never theirs to control. And now someone was coming in who would change everything. The door opened. They all sat in the room like players waiting for a ref to drop a whistle. The tension was a taut wire. The question was who would snap first. David Hale's arrival had shifted the geometry of the plan, but it didn't end it. It only made the game harder for both sides. He'd brought steadiness, but not invincibility. He had a flaw I hadn't mentioned. His phone battery was low, the little battery icon a thin red sliver. He clutched it like an old talisman anyway, thumb rubbing the cracked leather case as if that could buy him minutes. It meant he wasn't the cavalry. He was the best I'd managed to call under short notice. Anna watched him with a cool irritation that belonged to someone who resented outside interference. She didn't glare like a villain. She measured like someone who had to account for margins. She was mid-tier, smart enough to organize cons, forced enough to obey orders. The stranger, the enforcer, hovered in the doorway between study and hall the way a shadow holds a shape. His presence said who carried muscle. He wasn't violent yet. He didn't need to be. He was there to keep the timeline honest. 20 minutes. The woman from the back murmured without theatrics. She didn't announce it like a stage direction. She slid in behind Anna and passed a folded note with a single line to the enforcer. It folded back into her palm like a command. She kept her voice low. We've got 20 minutes from now before HQ sends the courier team. She spoke as though she were mentioning the weather. That made it worse. Anna's face darkened, but she didn't panic. She was good at pressure. She had to be. We can handle this, she said, quietly, but there was a tremor in the control. That tremor was a signal. The boss was real and close. The boss counted seconds. Mark finally did something that mattered. Up until then, he'd been small movements and quiet apologies. Now he stood and reached for the envelope on the table, the one that would hand them temporary authority over my accounts. His fingers hovered. For a second, I wondered if he would do the thing I'd expected him to do. Sign, and make the nightmare tangible. Instead, he turned the envelope toward me. Dad, he said, voice raw. Can you read this with me? I don't want it to look like I pushed you. He was buying time with shame and obligation. It was a clumsy maneuver, but honest. He'd tried intimidation before. Now he tried human weakness. It landed differently. Anna watched him, soft, clinical, then looked at me. It's better to sign, Ethan. It's cleaner. You'll be protected. The line was rehearsed. She'd said it before. David's phone flashed again in his hand. The battery warning pulsed. He glanced at it and swore under his breath. He'd expected this to be a conversation he could route somewhere. Call a friend at the courthouse. Send a quick text to someone who'd shut them down. Instead, he had a dwindling window to act. That small, unheroic fact made his jaw harden. He was competent, but not indefinite. Tell me exactly what happens after 20 minutes, I asked. The enforcer looked at Anna as if it were her turn. She swallowed. If we don't have the signature, we escalate. We take paperwork by force if necessary. We make sure the bank sees activity that looks legitimate, or we force access through third-party channels. We make it look like you consented. She didn't say we'll hurt you. She didn't have to. Her language was surgical. Methods, channels, plausible narratives. That was their tradecraft. Mark's hand tightened on the envelope. He spoke, but not in defense of the plan. Please, don't make it worse. We can. There's another way. Anna's eyes flicked to him, and there was a flicker I recognized. Irritation and fear at once. What way? You can wait, Mark said, and his voice nearly broke with it. You can let us. Give it a couple days. The bank will review anything suspicious. We'll fix this offline. He sounded like a child bargaining for a second bedtime story. The enforcer's mouth tightened. We don't have days. He reached, just a hair, toward his jacket as a reminder he could make the timetable strict. He didn't touch any weapon. He didn't need to. His movement was a metronome. David stepped closer to the table, the weak battery a private worry. He set his phone down and slid it toward me like passing a baton. If this goes sideways, he said, they'll do it clean if they can, but they will do it. The truth in his voice was a small kind of mercy. He wasn't bluster. He was warning. That was the fulcrum. If I moved to force the confrontation now, the result could be violent. If I complied, I'd live under the terms they set. Neither path was clean, but I had something both sides didn't. Time purchased by premeditation. I'd left instructions, quiet, encrypted, to a lawyer if certain triggers fired. That message hadn't been a shout for help. It was a safeguard for leverage. David knew this, and his glance at me asked whether I wanted him to push. Mark surprised everyone. He stood and took the envelope in both hands, then ripped it open halfway, so the form splayed soft and exposed. I can't sign this, he said loudly, to everyone. I can't make him sign. Not like this. I thought, his voice cracked. I thought Anna. Anna flinched, not from guilt, but from being exposed. She'd taught people to trust her. Now her ward had exposed the manipulation in front of the man whose life it would wreck. The enforcer's jaw tightened into a line. You just ripped it, he said flatly. That doesn't help. Mark shoved the papers back on the table, hands twitching. It's not about them, he said, surprising even himself. It's about what they do if this goes wrong. I don't want to be the reason he stopped. The look on his face was of someone who'd watched too many things die because of one small choice. Anna moved like a swift current. Calmness first, then damage control. Okay, enough theatrics. Ethan, you can sign a temporary form with full legal safeguards. We'll notarize. We'll set a sunset clause. That way no one gets hurt. Her voice was plausible, practiced. But Mark's slip had shown the human cost, and the enforcer resented displays of tenderness that could cost control. David laid his hand flat on the table in a small, steadying gesture and said, If you sign anything, you do so with counsel. I can call for a notary if we have 10 minutes. But my battery's dying. I don't know if I can hold this line long enough to get a proper verification. Anna threw him a look, not of contempt, but of calculation. He was useful, but he had limits. She had to adapt. The woman from the back door checked her watch and whispered into her sleeve. Command says 20. That was concrete, not a threat dressed up. The boss had stamped the deadline. They were a mid-tier crew with a mid-tier boss who didn't enjoy waiting. Time narrowed like a throat. David's phone slipped out of his hand and landed screen down on the table, the battery icon a smudge of red in memory. His face flashed then, annoyance, fear, resignation. He'd gambled on a small window and lost some of it. I made a decision in the space between breaths. You want a signature, I said. You want to move things. Give me the legal text. Put it in front of a notary. Let it be witnessed by someone I trust. Then we'll sign something that is verifiable, limited, and reversible. Anna's smile hardened. You know legal games, Ethan. You can stall for days. No, I replied. 45 minutes is all I need. My voice was steady. 45 minutes with a notary and a recorded statement. Otherwise, no. The enforcer's hand twitched. The woman's eyes went cold. Anna's jaw worked as she ran options in her head. 20 minutes stretched thin. 45 minutes was audacious. But it forced a decision into the open. Either they accepted a public procedure they could later contest in court, or they revealed how ugly they were willing to be. For the first time since the night began, the room was no longer about leverage only. It was about exposure. And exposure cut both ways. The room didn't feel like a living room anymore. It felt like a waiting room, the kind where everyone knows the outcome, but no one wants to say it first. The messenger's quiet words hung in the air. Courier team in 20. This wasn't theater. This was a deadline enforced by people who retrieved liabilities from halfway houses, sober homes, and relapse shelters. People who collected anyone who cost the ring money or time. David shifted closer to me, but not heroically. He looked off balance. His phone's red battery bar glowed before the screen dimmed again. He tapped it, frustration flashing across his face. Great, he muttered, barely audible. Perfect timing. A flaw. A real one. He wasn't cavalry. He was one more person under pressure. The enforcer checked the time on his own phone. A silent text had appeared. His eyes flicked over it, and for the first time all night, he didn't mask the tension. He folded the phone shut with a hard snap. They want confirmation soon, he said. That single line shifted the temperature. He wasn't posturing. He was passing down pressure, the kind that travels from handler to mid-tier operator to the vulnerable addict in the bottom rung. Anna swallowed tightly. She didn't break character. She clung to it. Her therapist's calm voice reappeared, but thinner. We can still do this quietly. We just need Ethan to cooperate. Mark snapped, finally. He stepped forward and grabbed the envelope from the table with shaking fingers. He didn't tear it this time. He didn't collapse. He held it like someone holding a grenade with the pin half pulled. Tell them we can't do it tonight, he said, turning to Anna first, then the enforcer. Tell them we need more time. The enforcer shook his head. You're not authorized to ask for that. Mark's face drained of color. I didn't sign up for this. Anna's voice sharpened, fear bleeding through the veneer. Mark, stop. But Mark didn't stop. He looked right at me. Dad, after rehab, I got involved with people. Her people. I thought I owed them. I thought I was fixing things. I didn't know it got this. Mark. The enforcer's voice was quiet. Warning quiet. Mark took a step back, bumping into the wall. Anna moved toward him, not to comfort, but to shield. He's scared, she told the enforcer. Give him a minute. We don't have a minute, the messenger murmured. She had already typed a message to someone unseen, thumb poised above the send button. If we don't report progress, they'll send the retrieval team early. And then this isn't a signature problem anymore. Retrieval team. A coded term, but not vague. Handlers who physically extract addicts or accomplices who become liabilities. Mark understood it instantly. His breath hitched. No, they can't take me. I followed everything you told me to do. Anna grabbed him by the arm, her fingers digging just a little too hard. Mark, look at me. You're fine. You're fine if Ethan signs. Her calm voice wasn't manipulative now. It was desperate reassurance, the kind you give someone who is next on the list. A sick realization settled in my stomach. They hadn't come here tonight because of me. They'd come because Mark was the one they couldn't afford to lose. Ethan signs or Mark gets taken. The equation was as simple and as cruel as that. I needed to reset the board. Immediately, I stepped between Mark and the others. Anna, I said, look at me. She turned. Her face didn't show anger now, just strain. The pressure from above was crushing her composure one crack at a time. You want this done right? I asked. You want your boss satisfied? Then you let me talk to Mark alone for 5 minutes. The enforcer scoffed. Absolutely not. 3 minutes, I countered. In the kitchen, door open. You four stay right here. No, the enforcer repeated. But Anna hesitated. She needed the narrative of voluntary signature. She needed Mark calm. She needed something they could present upstream to show she still had control. She looked to the messenger. If he calms Mark, we get compliance. We get a maybe, the messenger corrected. But maybe is better than stalled. The enforcer folded his arms. He didn't like it, but he wasn't making the final call. Not in this moment. Anna exhaled slowly. 2 minutes. That was all I needed. I placed a hand on Mark's shoulder. Come on. We stepped into the kitchen, still visible from the living room, but far enough for a whisper. Mark leaned against the counter, hands shaking. Dad, I'm sorry. I know, I said. I didn't think I didn't think they'd. Listen to me, I said sharply. Do you know what they do when someone becomes a liability? Mark nodded, terrified. They make you disappear, he whispered. They move you to another house. Take your phone. Take your meds. They detox you until you break. They call it stabilizing. My stomach tightened. Who runs them? I asked. Give me a name. I don't know his real name, Mark stammered. Everyone calls him Dr. Lyle. But he's not a doctor. He used to run a rehab program out of state before lawsuits. He disappeared and started this. He recruits people in recovery, tracks their debts, tracks their families. He fixes everything, and then you owe him. Dr. Lyle. Finally, a shape to the monster. We can't let them take you, I said. They will, he whispered. If this fails, they will. From the living room, the enforcer called. 30 seconds. I turned toward the counter, opened a drawer, and pulled out something very real. A thin USB stick taped beneath the cutlery tray. A quiet safeguard from months earlier, containing a hidden recording app I'd started running when I first suspected Mark and Anna weren't who they said they were. Evidence. Dates. Audio. A full ledger of conversations. I pressed it into Mark's hand. His eyes widened. Dad, you walk out with them tonight. You hand this to the courier team. They will search you, I whispered. But you're not leaving with them. He shook his head. They won't let me stay. They will, I said, because in about 5 minutes, they're going to believe I'm signing. Mark stared at me, stunned. You're going to fake them out? Yes. But you can't. Dad, they'll know. I just need them to believe it long enough for the real help to arrive. What real help? He whispered. The answer came from the living room, a sound none of them expected. Someone pounding on the front door. Hard. Authoritative. Not courier team quiet. The kind of knock used by people who don't ask permission to enter. Anna gasped. The enforcer stepped toward the hallway. The messenger froze mid-text. Mark looked at me, terror and hope warring in his face. I didn't move, because I knew that knock, and it wasn't from Dr. Lyle's people. It was from someone I'd called hours earlier, long before I knew the night would spiral. And now the entire house was about to change. The front door shook again. A voice shouted, "Open up." The knock at the front was a single hard rap, not the theatrical pounding I'd imagined, but the precise, measured sound of someone who meant business. It landed in the living room like a dropped weight. For a heartbeat, everyone froze. Then the room inhaled. Who is it? The enforcer muttered. Private investigator, I said before I could stop myself. I didn't want to lie. It would have been a poor time to invent one. He, Sutter, had come because he'd noticed my car in the bank lot earlier, the way a retired cop notices small deviations. Or because Janet had called him, uneasy after seeing a rush authorization request tied to my account. Or because he'd simply kept an eye on my number since that old case we tangled over years ago. Whatever the reason, he was there now. Mid-50s, beard cut close. Clothes that fit a man who still walked more than he sat. He didn't bang the door. He knocked like a professional testing a hinge. Anna's lips thinned. The enforcer's shoulders tightened. The messenger's thumb hovered over her phone. Now more than a prop, it was their lifeline. I watched them like a man charting a storm. Sutter's voice through the wood was flat. Ethan Cole, I've got a minute. The enforcer's jaw worked. Tell him to go away, he hissed. Sutter's next knock came 3 quick taps. No hesitation. No small talk. When the front door opened, he stepped in with his hands visible, not hostile, not foolish. He looked at the room, catalogued faces. A man who might be muscle. A woman with a satchel who tried to look indisputably ordinary. Another young woman whose phone screen reflected in her pupils. A pale young man hugging an envelope like contraband. He glanced at me last. Janet called me, he said quietly. Said something flagged. Thought I'd swing by. He didn't seem surprised by the scene. He seemed disappointed by it, like a cop whose overtime had been wasted by human weakness. That should have been a relief. It wasn't. The messenger's phone buzzed, the sound like a bee. She read, and the color bled out of her face. I saw her thumb move. Quick, practiced, then stop. Courier ETA, she said, voice small. 8 minutes. 8 minutes. The phrase landed like an electric shock. Not 20. Not some vague, they'll be around. 8 minutes meant the courier team was already in motion. They were close enough to take a local route, not fly in from a distance. In the world Anna and Mark had fallen into, courier teams were the parts that finished things clean. They didn't make scenes. They moved people and erased threads. They were called retrievals for a reason. You didn't get your son back from a retrieval. Sutter watched the messenger without blinking. They'll want the house cleared, he said. If they find a scuffle, they call their people and take whatever they need, people, devices, records. They won't wait for explanation. Anna's control hardened into something sharper. She stepped between Mark and the rest of us like a shield. We still have options, she said, the words brittle but composed. Let us handle it. No one needs to get hurt. The enforcer cut her off. We have no options if HQ wants a clean transfer, he said. His voice was flat now, not menace so much as resignation. He'd been ordered. He couldn't rewrite orders on the fly. Mark's face crumpled. For the first time, he didn't argue or plead. He made a choice, small, absurdly human. He shoved the envelope across the table toward me like a bribe or a confession. Take it, Dad. Do something. Don't let them use me. My fingers hovered over the paper and did not close. The sound of Sutter moving, soft steps, filled the gap. He set his palm on the table, careful and deliberate, not touching the envelope, but close enough that everyone noticed the space he occupied. Ethan, he said, directly to me, low and practical. Who else knows you're here tonight? Any cars leaving? Windows open. He was cataloging escape routes the way a surgeon checks instruments. He wasn't the cavalry. He was an assessor, which could be worse. He looked at Anna then. No pity, only a slow calculation. If those retrievals roll up and find you obstructing, they'll do what they do to fix obstruction. The messenger's phone chimed again. Her thumb trembled when she glanced at it. She barely whispered, "They've been given clearance." 5 minutes. The room tightened. The enforcer went from resignation to motion, small steps, checking windows, testing locks, finally behaving like the professional he pretended to be all night. Sutter's eyes met mine. He didn't offer to stop them. He offered a possibility. I can buy you a little time. I can call a favor, get someone to shadow the street. He tapped his temple, the universal sign of a contact. But it's messy, and it's going to look worse once the courier team arrives. I looked at Mark. He looked back like a boy who'd been told the medicine would hurt, but would save him. Anna's calm was starting to fissure into strategy. The messenger was already dialing, hands shaking. Outside, a car idled, a sound I had not noticed until then, and the gravel under its tires whispered the approaching reality. Sutter leaned in, quietly precise. 2 minutes to make a plan. What do you want me to tell them when I call? The house didn't go dark all at once. It flickered, once, twice, then collapsed into blackness like a throat closing. A moment of stunned silence followed. Then the enforcer whispered, "That wasn't us." Sutter exhaled. Breakers in the garage. Someone hit it from outside. A hint of old training surfaced in his tone. Calm, clipped, the way people sound when adrenaline is familiar. Outside, 2 engines idled low. Not approaching. Already here. The courier team. The messenger's phone vibrated urgently. She pressed the screen to her chest, whispering, "Protocol Delta. They're in contain mode." Contain. I knew that term from fraud casework. Containment meant secure the asset, secure the witness, remove the liability. Mark was the asset. Anna was the handler. The rest of us, liabilities. My pulse kicked. I forced it down. "Dad," Mark whispered, voice cracking. "They're coming for me." "I know," I said. "But we're not doing this their way." A faint click cut through the dark, the warm-up cycle of thermal optics. Not instant. A few seconds. Sutter murmured, "We've got a small gap before they see heat. Use it." Anna reached for Mark's arm, trembling. "Stay behind me. They won't take you if I present compliance." Her voice wasn't calm. It was determination wrapped in fear. Now I understood. She wasn't sacrificing herself to be noble. She was trying to repay the debt she'd pulled Mark into. One last failed attempt at control turned into a desperate act of protection. The enforcer moved toward the hall window. They're circling. They sweep front and back simultaneously. Which means they'll breach from both sides, David muttered. He had returned to my side, hand on the counter, grounding himself. Ethan, any blind spots in the house? His question snapped something useful awake in me. My mind immediately mapped the house the way I mapped bank fraud routes, pathways, intersections, choke points, escape corridors. The pantry and garage corridor are cold zones, I whispered. No heating vents. Their thermal will need to recalibrate to see bodies. Sutter nodded sharply. Cold zones by seconds. Seconds aren't enough, Anna hissed. They're all we have, I replied. Bootsteps approached the porch. Soft. Coordinated. Not loud intimidation, procedural entry. A courier spoke through the door, tone calm and flat. Cole residence. Opening in 10 seconds. Not asking permission. Announcing procedure. David leaned in. When thermal boot hits, they'll scan for the hottest signature first. That's the stove area, I said. I moved fast, twisting the burners on without igniting flame. Heat poured upward, a glaring beacon on thermal. Next I opened the fridge. Cool air bled out, creating a distorted gradient. Thermal hates mixed gradients, Sutter murmured. You just gave them noise. Noise. Not invisibility. But noise brought confusion. The courier team outside paused. I heard 2 sharp whispers, radio clicks, not raised voices. The enforcer tensed. They're recalibrating. Anna squeezed Mark's hand once. Ethan, take him. I'll buy you time. Mark jerked toward her. No, Anna. She turned to him, tears in her voice, but not in her eyes. I lied to you, but I didn't want this for you. The door latch clicked. Thermals were ready. We had seconds. Move, Sutter whispered. We slipped into the pantry, a cold pocket in the house. David closed the thin accordion door behind us, leaving a sliver to see out. 2 shadows entered, courier silhouettes, smooth and clinical. They didn't shout. They communicated in soft radio chirps. One scanned the living room, optics humming softly. The stove heat bloom distorted their read. The fridge glow confused edges. Anna stepped out deliberately into their view, hands raised slowly. I'm here, she said. Subject compliant. Father ready to sign. A lie, delivered with expertise she learned in the ring. A courier approached her, radio clicking twice. Handler identified. Retrieval prioritizing recruit. Mark stiffened in my arms. Anna whispered, go. Please. Not manipulation. A plea. The courier touched Anna's elbow, a subtle claim. Move with us. She did. Not because she wanted to. Because she knew refusal meant Mark was next. Sutter nudged me. Garage. Now. We moved silently through the corridor, cold enough that our outlines stayed faint. The enforcer darted down the basement stairs, not to flee us, but toward a known escape tunnel older houses sometimes had. He knew the ring's secondary routes. We reached the garage door. I eased it open, cold air flooding in. The thermal recalibration would flare again. Good. We slipped into the garage, then out through the side exit into the hedges. I guided Mark with a hand on his back, steady, patient. Halfway across the yard, Mark broke. She saved me, he whispered. She knew what they'd do. I know, I said. You hate her, he sobbed. But Dad, she gave herself up. I know. I said again, voice cracking despite myself. We climbed the neighbor's fence. Sutter hauled Mark over, then reached back for me. Only when we were crouched in the neighbor's shadowed yard did we finally hear it. A courier radio, sharp and decisive. Handler secured. Recruit not found. Initiating search pattern. Anna was gone. Taken. Bought by her choice. And our escape. Mark folded into me, shaking. Sutter stood watch, breathing hard now. Age and effort catching up. I held my son with both arms. And for the first time all night, I let myself feel the fear. We were alive. But survival had a price. Anna paid it. And the story, whether we liked it or not, was no longer in the ring's hands. It was in ours.